Iuliia, thank you for speaking with us. We really appreciate it. I want to just get a picture of what things look like in Kyiv right now. Walk us through what life is like right now in Ukraine and in Kyiv where you are. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? How are you holding up?
Well, we've been preparing for this psychological and military devastating threat in Kyiv for a couple of days right now. But the intensity of shelling of Kyiv hasn't been so intense as it is in Kharkiv, for instance, or in Mariupol at the moment. But we do expect the aggressive campaign of Russians in the nearest days. Today, they hit our television tower, and they also warned that they are going to bomb the administration office of Security Service of Ukraine, which is actually located near the sacred places of Orthodox Christian spiritual grounds, Sophia Kievska Cathedral, for instance. And what is very important and symbolic about this, that this cathedral, which is belonging to UNESCO heritage, hasn't been destroyed neither by a Tatar-Mongol invasion in 1270s, and nor in the Second World War by the fascist Nazis. So it would be extremely incredible if Russians, who consider Kyiv to be the cradle of Christian spirituality, just are willing to bomb these sacred places. So we do expect that this desperation and despair that Russian troops and Russian political leadership are experiencing at the moment will be transferred into these brutal attacks on civilians, which are actually they are doing already, and also on these sacred places of Kyiv.
Iuliia Osmolovska, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you are on the ground in Kyiv, where the TV tower was just hit and a 40-mile Russian convoy is lined up and ready to go. Does the potential fall of Kyiv, feel inevitable to you as you sit there?
No, I don't expect the fall of Kyiv. I do expect fierce fighting for Kyiv. And actually, we used to have, since the Second World War, the brands like hero cities and hero towns all over the Soviet Union, which actually bravely fought against fascist Nazis. And they received this label like Kyiv, a hero city, Kharkiv, a hero city, Minsk, a hero city, Moscow, a hero city. So right now, we seem to rebranding with the new meaning these hero cities, Kyiv, cities like Kharkiv, like Mariupol, like Kyiv. So definitely we are prepared for a very decisive, a cruel fight with Russians for Kyiv. And we don't expect the Kyiv to fall, definitely.
What specific diplomatic actions are multilateral organizations like NATO and the UN currently not taking that you would encourage them to take?
Actually, at this moment, I don't see that any negotiations offered to Russians will bear fruit because the two sides, I mean, the Russians and Ukrainians, have extremely polar demands which are unacceptable for another side. For instance, yesterday talks finished with no vivid results, explicit results, and it was quite expectable to have nothing as an outcome of these talks, because Russians still demanded their ultimatum, like to recognize Crimea being a Russian land, for Ukraine to give up its European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations to join EU and NATO, and all other things like that. And Ukrainian sides were quite precise with their demands. First is immediate ceasefire, and then second, the withdrawal of Russian troops all over the Ukrainian territory. So it was quite foreseeable that nothing came out of this. The only positive thing is that the two sides agreed to have the second round, which is going to be tomorrow. So it means that at least the room for negotiations are still there. Mm-hmm. So this possibility hasn't closed. But what we expect, and my assessment is that Russians because they failed with this blitzkrieg campaign in a couple of days, and they felt shortage of logistics like fuel, food, water for their combat troops. So they need some pause to beef themselves up and to get new troops coming in with restored logistics. So they just win in this time for more cruel attacks. It is a deceitful tactic and strategy of Russians, but Ukrainian side is well aware of this, and they are prepared that if Russians are sitting at the negotiation tables, it means nothing. It means that they're still prepared for something more brutal. And we do have this experience of infamous Minsk talks, which happened actually two serious battles, and Russians just forced Ukrainians to sign these agreements which were contrary to Ukraine's statehood.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that negotiations are mainly for optics, for it to look like Russia is willing to engage in diplomacy. Of course, what Europe and the US are counting on are sanctions. And I know in mid-February, you said you doubted that the US and European threats of severe economic sanctions would deter Russia. And that has pretty much been the case. At this point, is there anything else economically that the US and Europe could do to deter Russia?
Yes, I have to say that what we experience right now is incredible, complete different picture of what's going on, both with sanctions and also with some positions of European Union, like enabling the submission of offensive weapons to third party which are in the war right now. And also we're talking seriously right now about Ukraine joining EU on a special procedure. So in terms of sanctions, what we see, and which is very encouraging, we were talking last time about the possibility of these sanctions being imposed on the level of governments and countries. But right now, we also see that private companies, corporations, business, culture, all over the world are joining this, and we have this spillover effect of a huge condemnation of Russians' actions, and a lot of different actors, state and non-state actors, are joining this campaign. So I think that sanctions, they've really done a quite dramatic effect on Russia's economy, because ruble was depreciated yesterday up to 30% of its value. And a lot of financial institutions are on the edge of bankruptcy in Russia at the moment. And for instance, infamous company operator of Nord Stream 2 hinted that they had to confess that they're on the edge of bankruptcy. So I do see this spillover effect, and I see that the European countries and the United States and all our partners in the Western world, they're quite creative and inventive with new mechanisms of sanctions. So on this side, I'm quite optimistic. And to confess, while talking to Ukrainian MPs, politicians who are involved in this fight right now, they've already just lost the count of all these different mechanisms that are being introduced by our partners.
Well, I want to talk about the sanctions element here, because a lot of global powers, of course, putting forth sanctions that are crippling Russia's economy. But I've wondered if that's going to change Putin's behavior, especially given the way that he's sanction-proofed his own economy. Do you think Putin cares not just about the cost of war for his own country, but about the economic ramifications for everyday folks?
Well, definitely, when we try to assess the Putin strategy and mindset, it's not about rational thinking. So if we expected that, warned our Western partners that you shouldn't count on economic costs imposed on Russia, that this would induce them to change their behavior. But what we expect as an effect of these economic sanctions, so far, the Russian population, or ordinary Russians, have been silent on what's going on Ukraine. They didn't show the discontent with the policy of the political leadership because they were suppressed by the regime. But once they experience this discomfort, extreme discomfort, when they can't pay with cards, when they can't use these cards in Europe, when they see huge inflation and all this stuff, this would actually induce the level of outrage of Russian population at some point. This inflection point hasn't come yet, but I think it's a matter of a couple of days or nearest weeks. And also what we are doing, we're trying to show the real information to the Russian society. For instance, we've got access to the whole database with personal details of all the 120,000 of troops who are actually engaged in this military campaign in Ukraine, and we supplied this to the Russian side for ordinary Russians just be able to look into it and to see their sons, fathers, or relatives there.
Yeah, it's an alternative narrative from what they might be getting officially. Iuliia, thank you so much for joining us today. Iuliia Osmolovska joining us from Kyiv. Please stay safe. We appreciate your being here. This is Bloomberg Quicktake.